The views and opinions expressed on this program are those of the participants and do not reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
BronxNet. Your voice, your views, your vision.
Coming up, New York State approves same-sex marriage. What does it mean for your average New Yorker, and what are the constitutional ramifications? All this and more next on this edition of Today's Verdict. Welcome to Today's Verdict, the show that gives you your legal rights and options. I'm David Lesch, your host and trial attorney for the next 30 minutes. On June 24, 2011, lawmakers approved same-sex marriages in the state of New York. It was passed in a 33-29 vote that has made New York the largest state to allow the new marriage law. Let's take a look at what happened that day in New York's legislature.
Ayes 33, nays 29.
Gay marriage is now legal in the state of New York. Supporters filled the gallery at the State House in Albany Friday.
I feel incredible. I'm not even old enough to get married yet, but I'll be able to, which is so lovely.
On the other side, disappointment.
It's a sad day for them because they really lost. Because when you live in a world without God, you lose.
That God, not Albany, has settled the definition of marriage a long time ago.
Governor Andrew Cuomo, who championed the bill, quickly signed it into law Friday night.
That legislature worked together and they responded to their better angels. They responded to their hopes, not their fears.
Same-sex weddings can begin in the state in 30 days. This couple, together for 16 years, are already planning their wedding.
This is great. This is more than we ever could have thought would happen in New York in our lifetimes, and it's a wonderful thing. 4
Republican senators voted in favor of gay marriage, giving it the number it needed to pass.
Who am I to say that someone does not have the same rights that I have with my wife, who I love?
With 19 million residents, New York is now the largest state by far where gay marriage is legal. It's also a big win for supporters because the state includes New York City with its worldwide prominence.
Joining us in studio to discuss the long road taken to pass the same-sex marriage law is attorney Harold Price Ferringer of Ferringer & Dubno. Mr. Ferringer is one of the greatest constitutional lawyers this country has produced. Representing clients in areas of criminal and civil matters, he's presented over 15 cases to the United States Supreme Court and briefed over 400 cases in the federal courts. It's an honor and privilege to have him with us today. Mr. Ferringer, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, David. It's good to be here.
It's nice to see you again. Well, this is quite a momentous day for the gay community. Tell me your thoughts to begin with regard to the new law.
Well, I think it's one of the most powerful and most principled actions the New York State Legislature has made in many years, and I support it. And I support it for a reason that's a little different from others. We live in the freest nation in the world, and freedom is really a freedom of choice. You choose what political affiliation, you choose what religion. I think you should be able to choose your sexual preferences, and I think you should be able to be married even though the other person may be of the same sex. It's a matter of liberty.
Now, we're definitely going to get into the constitutional ramifications of this, but I want to take a step back to the history and how this bill came about. Now, we can talk about all the way back from 1969 with the Stonewall riots. How would you describe the events that transpired from the 60s to the 70s to the 80s in terms of the building of this particular strength behind the law?
Well, New York State is unique in the sense that it had its first gay movement that started at Stonewall in the 60s, and then it grew and grew through the years. There were other attempts earlier on, I think it was in the 80s, that a similar act like this was attempted to be passed unsuccessfully, but I think essentially the momentum was growing all along, and I think it's finally reached the right conclusion.
Well, it looks like, in terms of from the 80s, it looked like there was a step back with the AIDS epidemic.
Yes.
Certainly, a lot of the movement took a step backwards. Now we're into the 90s, okay? Let's get into the 90s here. And yet it's still falling short. Why in the 90s are we still not able to get the same-sex marriage law passed? It's true that we're able to get some other laws, but not that particular law. What is stalling it in the 90s?
Well, I think you have in New York State a very powerful religious constituency, and that's always been a factor. This is one of the states that the Catholic Church, for instance, is the strongest in, and there are amplifications, of course, and ramifications through the religious aspect of this, unlike other legislation, and that may well have been a deterrent. I know that there are some conservatives that in the state of New York that by convention and tradition think that this is quite revolutionary. But I'll say this, in a rapidly changing culture, which is what we live in now, I think precedent becomes irrelevant, and a long memory is a handicap.
Well, here's the thing. Let's talk about traditional marriage, right? Husband, wife. Can the argument be made that when the Constitution was enacted, that's what the framers really had in mind, and that it would really be an injustice to bend certain portions of the Constitution, whether it's the United States Constitution or in the New York Constitution, to be able to carve out a niche in this particular area?
Well, David, we've been doing that now for 100 years. Most of the most remarkable decisions that we have, take the abortion cases, have been carved out of that same general language. And so I don't think that's a fair argument against it. We have been interpreting the Constitution, and I think in New York State very liberally. Remember, New York State has its own Constitution that in many ways is more liberal than the federal Constitution.
Okay, but let me read a couple of these groups.
Sure.
So you have the Catholic Church, the Presbyterian Church, the United Methodist Church, the Southern Baptist Convention, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. It just goes on and on and on. All groups that are opposing this particular law on the grounds that it is not in the sanctity of marriage. How do you respond to these different groups who are now really up in arms with the fact that this law has been passed? What do you say?
I would respond in this way. First of all, the marriage can still be sanctified. I understand that there are many elements in the religious community today that would be very upset about sanctifying a same-sex marriage, but the truth of the matter is they build an exemption into the law for that contingency.
What is the exemption? Explain it to the viewers.
If a church declines to sanctify a same-sex marriage, the risk was, and this incidentally gained many votes in the legislature that they may not have had if they didn't provide for this. They provided that the church cannot be sued. No action can be taken against the church because they declined to sanctify the marriage, even though it's a law of the state of New York.
All right. There are, and I play devil's advocate, that's what I do.
Sure, I want you to.
Okay. Some people feel this is going to cost us a lot of money. Let me tell you why. Right. They feel that there are going to be, when you file taxes, you can have a marriage exemption. You usually get the deduction, marriage deduction, should I say, that most people are going to file for a marriage deduction. There are going to be different employment benefits that you're going to be able to get now if you claim you're a spouse. All these things add up. Health care, you can get on somebody's policy now. These are going to cost ultimately the taxpayers money.
I don't think it's going to be that significant, David. I think that's rattling a sword, so to speak. I think the truth of the matter is, and incidentally, some of these things are federally oriented. The tax deduction, to a large extent, it's in New York State, but it's also the federal government so far has not adopted the same-sex marriage. As a matter of fact, they have an act that will not recognize them. So you're not going to be able to do it on your federal tax return. That's very important. You can on your state tax return.
Now, from what I see, that this bill, now law, has a lot of ramifications in terms of children, even getting into divorce, which we'll get into at some point. Is it easier now to adopt a child, do you think, if you're coming forth as a married, same-sex couple?
What a lot of people don't really know, and I'm happy to share this with the audience, is you can be a single person and adopt a child. You can be two people living together and adopt a child. What the adoption agency is most concerned about is the welfare of the child. They made a wonderful motion picture, The Birdcage, which
With
showed,
Nathan Lane.
That's right.
That's right. He was very, very
it's
good
a
in that.
marvelous picture where exactly that situation is. Two men married or living together, and they raised a boy, and they showed what a healthy environment it can be.
You know, hold that thought, because we have to take a quick break, but stay with us, because coming up, we'll talk more about the passage of this new marriage law and what it means to New Yorkers. We'll be right back.
You know, when I was younger, man, my brother was the one who really took care of me, man.
Is that right?
Hey, he'd wake me up in the morning, get me ready for school, take a shower, make me some breakfast.
Where your brother at now?
Oh, you know, Iraq. I get lonely, nobody to talk to. I felt like quitting school. He looked at me dead in my eye, he told me, if not for me, do it for him.
Give Josh and our class of 08 the boost they need to graduate. Join us at boostup.org.
My name's Brandon. I'm 9 years old, being alcoholic.
Hi, Brandon.
I'll start drinking with the older kids. And whatever they do, I'll do.
Kids who drink before age 15 are 5 times more likely to have alcohol problems when they're adults. So start talking before they start drinking.
I know it'll start with alcohol. I'm just not sure how it's gonna end.
Low-fat cheese sandwiches on whole wheat bread. Chewy and good for you. Snacks high in calcium help build strong bones, and foods rich in fiber are good for your heart. So you have the power to dominate. Can your food do that? Run, throw, think, eat better. Find out more at smallstep.gov.
Hi, I'm Sean Johnson of the 2008 U.S. Gymnastics team. I'm here with our friends from VeggieTales to say, be a player, get up and play an hour a day.
Besides gymnastics, how do you stay in great shape, Sean?
I love to dance and rollerblade.
Cool.
You don't have to be an Olympian to be a player. Just do the things you already love to do, like jump rope, ride a bike, or even play freeze tag.
Now that's something to flip for.
Well done! For fun ways to get healthy, visit www.smallstep.gov.
Back. I'm your host, David Lesch. We at Today's Verdict want to hear from you, so send us your questions, comments, or show ideas to davidlesch@bronxnet.org. On today's show, we've been discussing the recent passage of same-sex marriage here in New York. It was a bill whose fate was unknown until the final votes were read, and in a 33-29 vote, lawmakers granted the right for same-sex couples to wed. Let's take another look at what lawmakers had to say on that momentous day.
And I'm only one here. That's okay. I am probably voting no. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator, I am asking my colleagues to please vote yes for all New Yorkers and to vote yes for me and Lewis. Thank you.
I cannot legally come up with an argument against same-sex marriage. Who am I to say that someone does not have the same rights that I have with my wife, who I love, or they have the 1,300 plus rights that I share with her?
The right and the freedoms that this Empire State has built its reputation on should live forever. It should live forever in these halls and in this room, because together in partnership, we're proving tonight that people that care can truly make a difference. I vote yes. Thank you.
Ayes 33, nays 29.
to have your attention. If I could have your attention. Ladies and gentlemen, if we just, I understand, if I have your attention, Bill number 1545, relating to marriage equality, the bill is passed. I ask.
Harold, did you hear that? They're chanting USA.
I think what is happening here, when you think of the Republicans that are normally, identified with more conservative causes, what they are also is responsible to their constituency.
But what do their constituents want, though, Harold? You're talking about a very conservative base in New York State, upstate. It's not every day that a Republican lawmaker switches to the Democratic side in the Senate. That's what's so powerful here.
You're absolutely right, and it could either be one of conscience, which I admire and respect, or it can be that we've misread some of the popularity of this. It might well, I know it's controversial, but they may have sensed in their own community an undercurrent that this ought to pass. And it's liberal.
Well, psychologically, what has this done to the, to the gay and lesbian community?
Well,
what does it do for them, really?
I mean, it is said that there are 50,000 gay couples in New York, and that's probably at least that many, and that's probably low. But it gives them a right to say we're married. It gives them a sense of legitimacy in those areas where they've been suffered somewhat by being scorned upon. I think it's tremendous. It gives them a great uplift.
Some of the other states that might be following New York's lead, which now New York gets a tremendous financial benefit, am I right?
Absolutely.
Okay, from the licenses and different things.
Sure.
You know that there are going to be other states that are going to want to have that financial benefit as well, and obviously appeal to the greater good, I would think.
Mm-hmm.
What other states are following here?
Well, I think right now my latest figures are that there are 36 states that have either eliminated the ban or have held in their judicial system that they will recognize same-sex marriages. But what I think is wonderful is New York State is the leader. We're taking the lead in this, and I think that's great. I think we will have a tremendous impact on the rest of the states.
Well, we certainly weren't the first. I mean, there were obviously 4 or 5 before us.
But
right?
we're the most populous state.
Right, that's true. We're the biggest right now. Am
Absolutely.
I correct?
California is still debating it.
Well, okay. Let's move past a married couple.
Mm-hmm.
And now what follows if that couple does not want to stay married, right? Which happens all the time in New York and throughout the United States. What happens when you want a divorce and you have a same-sex marriage? What do you do?
I think the laws that apply, the whole collateral system of laws that apply to a heterosexual marriage will be applied to a same-sex marriage. If a partner goes out and commits an act of sex, incidentally, adultery doesn't say anything about heterosexual sex. It says committing sex, one of the parties, with someone other than their partner. So you can get it in a divorce.
Yeah, but here's the problem. You have a residency requirement. In many states, you have to be living married or having been living married in a particular state. Am I correct?
That's right.
So what do you do if you now in a state that doesn't recognize same-sex marriage and you want to get a divorce? You can't get a divorce in that state because they didn't recognize same-sex marriage. So where do you go? You have to somehow live in New York for 90 days to be able to then get a divorce? It just doesn't make sense.
Well, David, if you're in a state that doesn't recognize it, then you're not married. So that may be a simple solution, but it doesn't answer your question. It may be that they would have to come back to New York and file for divorce here. That's done, all over the country. There was a time, for instance, in New York State, because you could only get a divorce on adultery, that people went out of state to get their divorce.
Harold, I'm going to throw a couple more curveballs at you.
All right.
But right now we got to take a break.
Okay.
All right? So please stay tuned with us. We'll be with you in about another 2.5 minutes. We'll see you soon.
When I was younger, man, my brother was the one who really took care of me, man.
Is that right?
Hey, wake me up in the morning, get me ready for school, take a shower, make me some breakfast.
Where your brother at now?
Oh, he know. All right. I get lonely, nobody to talk to. I felt like quitting school. He looked at me dead in my eye. He told me, if not for me, do it for him.
Give Josh and our class of 08 the boost they need to graduate. Join us at boostup.org.
My name's Brandon. 9 years old, being alcoholic.
Hi, Brandon.
I'll start drinking with the older kids. And whatever they do, I'll do.
Kids who drink before age 15 are 5 times more likely to have alcohol problems when they're adults. So start talking before they start drinking.
I know it'll start with alcohol. I'm just not sure how it's gonna end.
Low-fat cheese sandwiches on whole wheat bread. Chewy and good for you. Snacks high in calcium help build strong bones. And foods rich in fiber are good for your heart. So you have the power to dominate. Can your food do that? Run, throw, think, eat better. Find out more at smallstep.gov.
Hi, I'm Sean Johnson of the 2008 U.S. Gymnastics team. I'm here with our friends from VeggieTales to say, be a player, get up and play an hour a day.
Besides gymnastics, how do you stay in great shape, Sean?
I love to dance and rollerblade.
Cool.
You don't have to be an Olympian to be a player. Just do the things you already love to do, like jump rope, ride a bike, or even play freeze tag.
Now that's something to flip for.
Well done! For fun ways to get healthy, visit www.smallstep.gov.
Okay, we're back with Harold Price Farringer. Harold, I said before the break I was going to hit you with a curveball. I'm going to hit it with you right now. You ready?
Ready.
Okay. You get divorced in New York State. It's equitable distribution. Am I correct?
Right.
Premarital assets are not considered in a divorce.
Right.
Some of these unions have been together 15, 20 years. Now they're allowed to get married. You know they shared property, or you know at some point one of them had the house that both of them lived in. What do you do?
A lot of this, David, is going to be litigated. I think I could say now with a measure of safety that what's going to be applied to that situation is what would be applied to a heterosexual marriage. Same principles will apply to a same-sex marriage. I can't think of anything right now that would be different.
I'm just trying to think of the situation where you might, maybe custody, you're correct.
Sure.
But I'm just trying to think of property. You know, you have these same-sex unions that they've been together for so long, now 15, 20 years, and I can imagine one of the partners saying when they get married for a year and they want to get divorced and say, well, wait a second, what do you mean I don't get the house?
Well,
the house was in your name, but so what? We lived there for 20 years.
One of the things that I'm sure is going to be done, just as in heterosexual marriage, there'll be prenuptial agreements. They can do that in a same-sex marriage. That will protect certain assets that have been accumulated by one party long before the marriage.
All right, well, you're the constitutional law expert, so let me ask you, where are we going in terms of questions like this in the Constitution? We have a conservative court, but certainly we're moving in another direction as a country. Where do you feel we're going with issues like this?
Well, one thing, David, I think this is an enormous step forward, and it's a good one. It's one that I'm proud of. I'm proud of New York and the people who are responsible for that. But it's also going to initiate an awful lot of liberal thinking. I don't think there's going to be a bad backlash on this. I think people are going to say, well, that's not so bad once they become accustomed to it, and then they'll be more liberal on other matters.
Well, when these constitutional issues come up before the court, I want to go with you when you argue it.
Thank you.
And you promise you'll come back?
I will. I love it, David. Right. It's a pleasure being here.
It's been a pleasure having you. Well, that's all for tonight. It's time to deliberate. I'd like to thank Mr. Farringer for joining us, and of course you for watching. Remember, if there is a legal issue or topic you would like to see on the show, email me at davidlesch@bronxnet.org. And until we see you again, always remember, know your rights, know your issues, reach a verdict. We'll see you next time.